Talking Business on Radio Q.
Joining me now is Ian Aitchison, who's the head of the Asia Pacific region for COPC. G'day, Ian. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, Ian, COPC began, I think, life as a system for measuring or assessing call centres. Is that right? Back in 1996.
So, yeah, COPC was founded in 1996 in the USA, and initially it was set up to provide a set of management practices and a management framework for managing contact centres.
And by the industry itself, isn't it?
It was. It is still governed by a users group called the Standards Committee, and the initial users on there included companies like American Express, Microsoft, and various other giants like that.
And do they still own COPC, or is it owned separately now?
It's a privately owned company, and so those founders are part of a governing body called the Standards Committee, but they don't have an ownership stake in COPC.
Right, and so is it fair to say that back in 1996 the focus was on call centres, but it seems like that's changed a little since then, and you're now more broadly engaged in customer experience?
Yeah, very much. Back in 1996, call centres were still very new. It was very much a voice-based industry. But now we help organisations improve their customer experience operations. For example, contact centres, branch networks, websites, mobile apps, web chat, things like that.
And so I suppose the other thing that's occurred since 1996 is the outsourcing of call centres and the outsourcing generally of customer experience. Has that changed the role of COPC and your industry in general?
COPC helps companies make better decisions both about managing their own internal operations as well as making decisions about outsourcing things like contact centres. Outsourcing and offshoring is just one of the many levers available to companies to help, I guess, reduce the cost of service delivery. And we have helped hundreds of companies make decisions about whether to outsource onshore or outsource offshore. And we've seen many successful examples of offshoring to countries such as Malaysia, India, and these days particularly the Philippines.
But I guess the sense that one gets as an outsider is that there's a trade-off between cost and quality, and do you engage with companies about that? And how often do you advise companies not to outsource because you will lose the quality, the direct engagement with people?
Yeah, it's a very good question and quite a widely held belief about offshoring. Countries like the Philippines have educated English-speaking workforces who are willing to work on much lower salaries. And actually what we find is they're willing to also do the types of call centre jobs which many Australian companies are finding hard to fill onshore. But that in itself is not enough of a reason to send work offshore. I think companies should really consider their offshoring strategies pretty carefully. Let's take the insurance industry as an example. When it comes to a claim on home insurance, you've got to think, do you really want to, say, a 20-year-old Filipino dealing with a 55-year-old Australian male? How can that Filipino with no experience of owning or insuring their own home and contents really empathise with someone from say, the Blue Mountains as having to make a claim after losing items in a bushfire? And so you've got to think, well, should I have outsourced that part of my business? There are other parts where the empathy or the technical skills work really well. Technical support, for example, support for a laptop or your smartphone or your internet. That's one type of transaction that's been very successfully offshored. And lots of the global technology firms have invested a lot of time in developing better training programs for their offshore staff or their outsourced staff. And a big part of this success is not only because the companies are investing time in training and development, but also the staff offshore can empathise with that technical support, with those products, because they are familiar with or own similar products to what they're supporting.
So obviously, one of the things you do then is to advise companies what functions to outsource and what not to outsource.
Yeah, very, very much.
And how much money can be saved through offshoring? The
average salary for a call centre worker in Australia just now is about $45,000. The average salary for a contact centre worker in the Philippines is about $5,000.
Quite a bit then.
Yeah. So even if you're paying $10,000 per person in the Philippines, it's a pretty big saving.
One gets the feeling that Manila is turning into a vast call centre.
Manila is definitely the hub. You're often meeting people in the contact centre industry in the airport in Manila. It's got a massive population of people who previously would have left Manila to go and work overseas in other sort of customer service roles in hotels or in other industries. And I suppose the contact centre industry is doing a great thing in being able to keep those people in Manila.
So what are the common mistakes that companies make, apart from perhaps outsourcing the wrong function?
There are probably two main common mistakes that we see when companies are setting up contact centres. I guess the first sort of pitfall that companies are falling into is developing the contact centre as a standalone department with the responsibility for dealing with customer issues, and they haven't built in enough cooperation or linkage to other business units. So what I mean by that is that a company might find an increase in phone calls or complaints coming in, but that's really just the symptoms of the poor customer experience. The root causes of the poor customer experience might lie outside of the contact centre. It might lie in product design or pricing or logistics or an inability to return products.
Well, almost certainly would lie outside the contact centre.
So at COPC, we help companies join the dots together by mapping out their customers' journeys, and then we help them to identify ways of improving the customer experience. And a great benefit of doing that is also we often find ways of reducing internal costs, improving internal operations to do that.
I imagine a lot of that these days is entirely online customer journeys.
Yep. So online is becoming a really important part of the customer experience, both in terms of customers finding out about products and services, as well as being provided support from companies.
And you said there were two common mistakes. What was the other one?
The other one is a little bit more specific to the contact centres themselves. One of the problems that has happened as the contact centre industry has evolved is no one goes to university to learn how to run these operations. There's no generally accepted principles of running contact centres. And so many managers are rarely taking a structured approach to managing their contact centres, and they focus on what is easy to measure, which is typically how fast are things being done. We think at COPC that companies should focus on how well things are being done, and so we help companies set up their contact centres correctly by using the structured approaches within the COPC standard to solve management issues such as setting the right targets, improving recruitment, improving training quality, improving customer satisfaction, absenteeism, attrition, workforce planning, areas like that.
Right. And I wonder whether technology is changing not just the way that customers operate, but the way that companies deal with the customers. Are you having to get involved in that as well?
There are some really interesting changes in technology happening right now. China's probably led the way in this change, and Australia's playing catch-up. But what I'm talking about here are what are called chatbots. Chatbots are where the web chat that you have online with the company is being responded to not by a person, but by artificial intelligence, by computer program. And although it's made to sound or read as though it's a human responding, and that includes putting in a delay in between responses so it doesn't automatically come back up, these chatbots are available 24/7. They rarely make mistakes unless the programming behind has programmed them incorrectly. And I think that is going to really change the way simple transactions are dealt with.
But you also get that in voice when you ring up somebody. Sometimes companies, you clearly get a robot at the end of the line.
So in voice, the IVR, the sort of voice response that you get is more frequently used to direct your call to the right place, although there are some times that you might be able to check your balance using the voice. But customers don't really like these voice response units, whereas the web chats have been built so that you would not even know that you're talking to a robot and you think you're talking to a person.
Right. Well, that is a brave new world.
Certainly is.
Great to talk to you, Ian. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I've been talking to Ian Aitchison, who's the head for Asia Pacific of COPC.